This is Sunday morning. It is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Texas Pete, drama for your mouth. Bob Pasella, Hans Heiser. After a just phenomenal Saturday of college football in the SEC, the upsets in the conference.
No, not yesterday. Not yesterday.
Everything went according to plan
yesterday.
It was
chalk. It was chalk. And the games weren't even competitive, which I think we expected as well. What was the number? I think it was
34.5. Our producer Mark tells us the average margin of victory by the SEC teams yesterday. It got pretty ugly.
Well, you had the big boys in action. Alabama, of course, taking on Tennessee, and they did what they had to do. We'll break that game down. I think on a national level, though, it wasn't just the SEC that went chalk, Bob. It was everybody in the country, all the nation's top teams, with the exception of USC, who in their defense did go on the road and take on a Notre Dame team who Georgia fans are closely paying attention to that win-loss. Notre Dame wins again, but outside of USC, Bob, no shakeups in the top 25.
Here's what I got at yesterday's big picture, the national picture, is that I do not think there will be two teams from the SEC going to the playoff. You got Notre Dame winning yesterday, which helps Georgia, makes Georgia's victory over Notre Dame on the road look that much better. But now all of a sudden you have Notre Dame as a team that could run the slate and finish with just one loss. In the Big 12, TCU is still unbeaten. Miami is still unbeaten in the ACC.
Smoke and mirrors, house of cards.
Yeah, I don't know how Miami's getting, but they are. At the end of the day, they're still unbeaten.
And they have to play Notre Dame down the road. So let's not forget about that matchup coming up.
If there is one conference, Hans, right now that I think may be on the outside looking in, it's going to be the Pac-12.
Yeah.
No team in the conference is unbeaten. USC goes down to its second loss. Washington State lost an awful game to California. Washington has lost. Right now, to me, the Pac-12 is on the outside looking in.
Washington, I think, might be the only team that's got a case just because they have a pedigree of being there last year. They only have the one loss. It was a tough road loss in conference. But with that being said, they're going to have to run the table. They have a tough game coming up next week, UCLA at home. I know UCLA's had some tough stumbling blocks along the way, but UCLA, a team that could maybe give them a little bit of problem. But Washington's the only team realistically that has a chance. But here's the question, Bob. Notre Dame, yeah, sure, they play, 4 or 5 ACC games a year? They don't have a conference tie-in, TV, BCS, all that. There is an agenda when it comes to Notre Dame, and I'll say it right now. We were having the argument before. If you have a one-loss SEC team, may it be Georgia, Alabama, I don't know that happens, but how does the committee look at a one-loss Notre Dame team against a one-loss Georgia team if that's the comparison that has to be made? Even though Georgia beat Notre Dame on their home field, you still have to throw in that agenda, the fact they're Notre Dame. And I side with you, Bob. I think you're right. I think the committee chooses Notre Dame, and Georgia fans would lose their minds.
Yeah, they beat them on the road. How do you not pick them? Okay, here's a scenario we haven't thought about. What if Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC title game? That's Alabama's only loss.
They'll just stop the season and have a championship parade right there. That would be one of the biggest wins in school history.
But do you take one-loss Alabama or one-loss Notre Dame? In that case, you got to take Notre Dame, don't you?
Yeah, and credit to Notre Dame. They've got a tough schedule this year, man. You talk about having Georgia come on your home field. They just took care of USC, a rivalry game they play every week. They got NC State, Dave Doring's team, playing much better this year. They come in at 6-1, and then they have the game against Miami later on down the road. So don't forget, Miami's still undefeated. So their strength of schedule is going to continue to increase. They're going to get more votes so long as they continue winning, and that's also good news for Georgia if they are in that one-loss situation. If it's not Notre Dame they're being compared to, if it's a school from the Big 12 that's one loss, maybe it's Washington, maybe it's a second school from the Big 10. We haven't Big 10 rather. We haven't talked about Penn State's big win last night.
For Penn State.
They go on the road next week taking on Ohio State. Ohio State coming off a bye, so still a lot of football left to be played.
Well, let me tell you what we're going to do on the rest of this show. We're going to break down every SEC game, of course. We're going to talk about the Georgia-Florida game next week. We also want your comments. That's coming up in just a bit. But let's start with the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. First game we want to break down is Alabama-Tennessee. This game pretty much went as we expected it to go. The line was 35, so Tennessee didn't cover. I would have taken Tennessee, but that's neither here nor there. But Vols now 0-4 in conference play. Butch Jones, when does he get the axe? Does he last the season? Tied 332 yards passing, 272 yards rushing. Tennessee, Hans, 108 yards of total offense, and it was bad.
That's the lowest total in 20 years for Tennessee, by the way. Butch Jones falls to 14-22 as head coach in conference play. If it's not for the defensive touchdown, they don't score in this game. This was as one-sided as you expected. I think moving forward, people, it's not a question of whether Butch Jones gets fired. It's just a matter of when at this point. Monetarily, I don't know how much money they have to pay him. I believe the math is it's $600,000 increments week by week that comes out of that buyout. So that's got to be part of the plan here. But here's the deal. Kentucky just got embarrassed on the road this week at Mississippi State. I think we can all agree that their 5-1 record going into that game was a little bit inflated as far as who they are. Kentucky this week, they host Tennessee. If Butch Jones loses to Kentucky on the road this week, I think that's the breaking point. I don't think he survives the rest of the season. I don't know how you can continue going forward.
Let's break down this Alabama offense. We got to see a lot of Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. No, I'm going to give up on that right now. I'm on the spot, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce it
the left-handed backup from Hawaii, the freshman. We know who you're talking about.
Who made one mistake in this game, threw the pick that gets returned for a touchdown, and Rashawn Golden, man, flipping off the Alabama student.
Do you imagine? Could you imagine? You imagine one of the assistants going, Nick, you won't believe what that guy just did at the end zone. Code red, put it on him for it. Hey, I will say this on the interception. You want to watch a funny replay? Watch the Alabama players. The reason the guy ran it back is because they didn't know what to do. They'd never seen their quarterback throw an interception. Everybody's looking at each other like, what do we do? I mean, it's just, absolute domination. And week in, week out, what it is, Bob, it's the offensive line. They just manhandle their opponents.
Hurts started this game off slow, and then he, second half, I think he completes his first 4 passes. They go on the touchdown drive, and Nick says, I've seen enough. Tua, he's got a ways to go on his passing game, but I'll tell you what, did you see that touchdown run? He just looked like a fullback. Bam. You're not going to stop that kid once he gets ahead of steam.
No, I think Coach is doing a great job of getting him opportunities to get him out there on the field. I don't know. What do you think about Jalen Hurts' prospects as a professional quarterback? I mean, he's not a guy that's going to leave after next year, is he? I mean, he's a 4-year guy.
I don't think the NFL is looking at him in that vein at all.
Right. So, I mean, you're looking at in that role, for the next couple years. So, get him playing time when you can. But, yeah, I know the run you're talking about. Very, very impressive. Alabama wins the turnover battle again yesterday, 2-1. They continue to dominate opponents in that game. Now, here's the deal for Alabama. Off week before they get ready for the Bayou Bengals. LSU, that's going to be an 8 o'clock game on CBS as they'll go double duty. And this is one of the games every year. If you're a football fan, you circle on the calendar. You know it's going to be a slobber knocker affair. And I don't think that this year will be an exception. LSU, they win yesterday. Winners of 3 in a row. Playing with a lot of momentum. They'll have a bye as well. So that's going to be a great game coming up in a couple weeks.
I want to talk about this Tennessee offense real quick, or lack thereof, which still hasn't scored a touchdown. They had a play, I can't remember where it was in the football game, where they go to a flea flicker. You remember the play. Right. No time for Garantano to throw. He gets sacked.
There.
But 2 receivers on the play, and neither one of them go out for the pass.
Right.
So essentially, even if he had time to throw, he had no one to throw to, which is Tennessee's offense in a nutshell. How could it possibly get this bad this quick?
They had some injuries to some key guys, some leaders on the team early on in the season, but at this point, nobody's pointing the fingers and making excuses. You have lack of depth, lack of execution, 2 major penalties defensively yesterday, and you can't beat yourself against Alabama. They had them stopped on 3rd down. Same guy, illegal use of the hands to the face, extended both drives. They go on to score instead of 7-0. It's 21-0. You know they're getting the ball out of the halftime, which you know is going to be 28-0, and the rest is history. But offensively, they're very limited. I was a little curious about the decision to change quarterbacks. At this point, though, I agree with you. I mean, you just got to shake it up. John Kelly, he's everything on offense. He was held in check yesterday. If he's not able to get going, Tennessee's not able to get going. So, like I say, I think everything points to next week, that game against Kentucky. They have got to find a way to win that game. No excuses. I honestly believe if they don't win that game next week, the pressure is going to be insurmountable for them not to fire Butch Jones.
Well, as you said, it's not a if, it's a when, Butch Jones gets it. I thought he might get it this coming week. He's certainly not going to put an interim coach in to face Alabama, but you nailed it on the head. His record, despite 2 straight 9-win seasons coming into this year, his record in SEC games is just 14-22.
And he's in the East.
And he's in the East.
Right.
Regardless of who you think Tennessee is as a program, that's just not going to cut it.
No.
And from the days of the General to Phil Fulmer, you got to win football games at Tennessee, and that's just not going to cut it. I think Butch might last the season, but yeah,
you're not beating Alabama. You're not beating Georgia, and you're not beating Florida. And those are the 3 games as Tennessee head football coach. You have to find a way to win. Got
to beat your rivals.
You want some Saban numbers real quick? 11-0 all time against Tennessee. That's 11-0. And for the 7th time in his 11 years at Alabama, he has them out to an 8-0 start.
Tunga Bailoa.
You're still working on that?
All right, I want to get to your comments, and I love what's coming in. Chris Warren says, LSU going to the Music City Bowl to play Troy again. Wouldn't that be fun? Chris Phillips says, Hurts is a terrible quarterback, just another running back. And
I don't believe
come
that.
On, he's not an NFL guy, but this is a very good college
Terrible's a little bit strong.
Oh, he's a very good guy.
How many teams in the nation would rather have a guy other than Jalen Hurts running their offense? I mean, really, how many guys are out there?
I agree. 90% of the teams out there will take Jalen Hurts as their starting quarterback and be very happy with that.
Right.
Yeah, Robert Horde, why even talk about Tennessee, period? Heck, it's lack thereof on the whole team. Tennessee,
they competed yesterday. They did.
They came out and played hard. It was a 7-0 game midway through the second quarter. Now, granted, Alabama fumbles in the end zone there, but it was a 7-0 game.
And you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming at some point. Saban could not be happy with the way they played in the first half. He said after the interview, he was not happy at all with the way his team practiced this week. He expected them to play sluggish in the first half, which they did, but credit to them, credit to the coaching staff, credit to the players. They made those adjustments there somewhere in the second quarter. Those 2 penalties really helped them out, but the Tide kept on rolling. What was the total yardage final here? Let me look at this. It was so lopsided. It was one of the most absurd lines I've ever seen in my life.
It was the 3rd largest discrepancy in Alabama history.
And that's saying a lot.
Almost 500 yards difference.
604 total yards to 108. 604 to 108. And that's 72 consecutive wins, by the way, for Alabama against unranked opponents.
Wow. All right, let's take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. LSU Ole Miss. A few weeks ago, we're talking about how bad this LSU team is. Well, now all of a sudden, Ed Orgeron's team has won 3 games in a row, and they have reestablished their physicality on both lines, which wasn't there in the Mississippi State game. And Troy just out-physicaled them. I had no hope for this LSU team. All of a sudden, won 3 straight, Hans, 6-2 overall. Alabama.
Yeah, and here's the thing about LSU. We talked about it early in the year about some of the injuries and being so young. They started a true freshman at left tackle yesterday. Imagine starting at left tackle in the Southeastern Conference, right? I mean, how physically gifted you have to be to compete against those grown men. They started a true freshman at right guard. They started a true freshman at safety and a redshirt freshman at safety. They started 4 freshmen yesterday. So these are guys that are getting experience as the season goes along, and you have to think that they're just going to continue to get better. Arden Key was a huge difference maker yesterday on defense, and then who was supposed to be that guy on offense? Darius Guice. All season long, we said he didn't look right. 22 carries, 276 yards, 2 touchdowns, becomes the first running back in SEC history with 3 games over 250 yards. Guys like Herschel Bowe, guys like that.
First guy, wow.
Yeah, he's the real deal, man. Now that Matt Canada's got this offense that he can kind of build around him, and then you got Chark rather, and the season's over.
Well, the offensive line was so physical last night, and Guice, to his, he just kept plowing ahead on the off tackle plays, taking his 3 and 4 yards, and then bam, he would bust one. I mean, they were completely physical. He was amazing last night. Williams his rushes for over 100 yards as well. Bad news for Ole Miss in this game. Shea Patterson hurts the knee. Right. Ole Miss is what it is. Matt Luke it was nice to know you, but it's the rest of the season doesn't look pretty for this team.
Well, this was a game again yesterday. I mean, I know all the scores were blowouts, but this was a game that was close early on. I think it was 23-16 at one point there in the late in the second quarter. They had a huge play called back on a penalty, which was really the turning point of the game. Patterson gets hurt, so the tailback goes out as well, Wilkins, I believe. So, I mean, you have your two-star players on offense. A.J. Brown was held in check yesterday, but they come back in the second half, and Shea Patterson wasn't the same. He wasn't able to make plays with his feet extending, and that's what he relies on. But this has become kind of a lost season for Ole Miss. And, they came out, they fought, they competed.
Season, good way to put it.
Yeah, they came out, they competed, they lost. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do as far as a coach goes moving forward, what kind of name recognition they'll get in there, because they have had some success recruiting lately for reasons we won't get into. But Oxford's a nice place. Kids want to go play there. So I think it could be an easier rebuild than, say, a place like Arkansas.
I wonder if Ed went over to that Exxon station and got the chicken on the stick afterward.
I will get me some chicken on stick.
All right, here's the big question. 2 weeks from Saturday.
Yeah.
Can LSU go into Tuscaloosa, not necessarily win the game, but can LSU compete with Alabama?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think defensively they're going to be obviously more challenged than they have all year. But I think offensively, I was very skeptical on this offense early on, and rightfully so. I think everybody was. Danny Edley including. He didn't look like he had a clue what he was doing running this offense. But now you got these two receivers, and you watch these guys play, talking about Chark and Gage. These guys, they use them in so many ways. They use them in the running game. They use them in the passing game. And they're always blocking some downfield. Open up roles for holes. And you don't know where the ball is. You were really moving guys around pre-snap and hiding where it's going. And I think offensively, they're going to give Alabama's defense every big challenges they had all season. Usually it's the other way around. Usually LSU, the only chance they're going to have in an Alabama game is a 3-0, 6-3 type of football game. But I think offensively, they're going in the right direction, man. They would scare me.
Well, Matt Canada's offense showed a lot of diversity yesterday. The touchdown that made it 30-16, they kind of fake the sweep, and then they throw the little shuttle pass to the tight end. I'm like, that's a very nifty play. That's something that, might catch a team like Alabama that's so fundamentally sound off.
They're both coming off. They're going to have bye weeks. Imagine the week. They're not.
Alabama had a bye week this week, though. Some will say.
Some will say that they're going to be prepared. It's going to be a heck of a football game. I mean, a couple years ago, these games that they used to play was like 9-6 and whatnot. And people didn't really like it aesthetically. They said, "Well, that's not the kind of football that I want to watch." BS, man. They had 30 guys on the field, not at one time, that played in the National Football League. I mean, this is the cream of the crop of athletes in college athletics, going at each other full speed. This is what you want to see. I think it's going to be a heck of a football game. I really do. I think it's as tested as Alabama's going to be all season long.
All right, I want to go to the scroll, get some of your comments. Damon Warren, watch it. That chick on a stick is righteous. I hear you, man. Matthew Shane Taylor, LSU versus Alabama is always an amazing game. David Levinson, nobody beats Bama. Tom Wilkinson, we want Bama, we want Bama. Yeah, be careful what you ask for. Back to Chris Warren.
Yeah, Vanderbilt it'll be a good Bama, remember?
Yes.
Bring on Bama!
Chris Warren says it'll be a good game until kickoff. I do have that feeling that it is going to be a very competitive football game, or Alabama gets a break early, goes up 14-0, and then the defense just takes care of the rest, and it becomes somewhat of a ho-hum slugfest from there.
But LSU on the defensive side of the ball, they have the athletes, especially in the front seven. If Alabama, they're going to make Ridley in Alabama throw the football. If they want to, I don't want to say take away the run, but they will do as good a job as anybody in the nation from an athletic standpoint, being able to stay in, with 7 in the box. They're not going to have to load it up to stop Alabama's run game like a lot of teams do. And I just think that's going to present a different type of challenge. But you got to, Alabama's going to have some wrinkle up their sleeve, something that they haven't showed anybody yet. And that's what makes them Alabama.
Brian Dable has done an amazing job on offense.
Absolutely has.
Sarah Cruz says, I believe University of South Florida could beat Bama. Come on, Sarah.
It's
really?
so early in the morning to be drinking. It's 10:20. Or if you're a little bit...
Tammy W. Carter is going to give us a score. 42-17 Alabama. Matt D's Bama is trash, overrated trash. Again, you mentioned the drinking. Yeah, I think the only way this gets out of hand is some early turnovers by LSU, which could happen. But otherwise, I do see a pretty competitive slugfest physicality in this game all over the place.
You bring up an interesting point about the turnovers with LSU because of this offense and the nature of the beast with all the movement and everything that has to go into place, the timing, the blocking downfield in order to have it run properly. You would think that would increase the chances of turnovers, but they've done a great job of holding on to the football. And this offense continues to get better, but I think a lot of it, most of it has to do with Darius Guice being healthy. Let's not overshadow what this guy did yesterday. 276 yards. This guy was at the top of the conversation for best running back in the country, Heisman Trophy preseason candidate, and he just hasn't been the same. And they said going into this week's practice, this is the best he's felt all year, and man, he really showed it yesterday. No question about it. He's the difference maker there. But here's the true test. 276 yesterday against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
What's he do against Alabama? How many times does he get the ball against Alabama? How many over or under carries for Darius Guice against Alabama? Hit 22 yesterday.
He's got to get to the 20 mark.
Right.
If he carries the ball, I think that's a good barometer.
That's what I'm saying.
He carries the ball 25 times, they win. If it's only 15 times and he has no yardage like Leonard Fournette, then they're going to lose the football game.
I'm glad you brought up Leonard Fournette because you think about those last two games against LSU, where here he is, Leonard Fournette, the big bad daddy, the best running back in the country. If anybody's going to be able to establish a running game against Alabama, it's going to be Leonard Fournette. I mean, he would get the handoff, and as soon as he got the football, there were Alabama jerseys just draped over him. Now, different style of back in Darius Guice, but if that's the game plan, again, which you have to expect it's going to be a large part of it, can Danny Etling make plays? Can he
He's going to have to. He's going to have to.
But can he?
I don't know. I'd have to, you're asking me right now, I'm betting against him, but prove me wrong, and I think that's what Alabama's going to do.
I'm going to give you three names real quick, not to get off subject. Jake Fromm, Danny Etling, and Stidham. Out of those three, if they are in a situation where they have to make plays with their arms against Alabama, because more than likely all three of these teams are going to play them, it's going to be Alabama's biggest challenges. Which one of those three poses the biggest threat against Alabama throwing the football?
Well, all things being equal, I'd take Stidham in that situation, but I'll still take Fromm with Georgia's offense over Stidham.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
All right, you want to move on?
Yeah, I just want to get your take on that. Sorry, we're on.
Appreciate it. Who do you take?
I think I take Fromm. Stidham yesterday missed some throws again. Yeah. I don't know what's going on with that, but we'll see. We'll see.
All right, let's take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Arkansas, Auburn yesterday. Auburn offense was back. 52-20 is the final count in this one. Petway is back and healthy, scores 3 touchdowns, rushes for 90 yards, and I think start right there, Hans, with the running game. When Auburn runs the football, when Petway and Johnson get going, this team is very viable, and they were going yesterday, and you see the total yardage ridiculous.
Yeah, and it was nice to see Petway back on the field, 3 touchdowns, to go around kind of like a thunder and lightning type deal. But I think Stidham, it all begins and ends with him. He missed some throws yesterday. I don't want to say he's been hit or miss because I think some drops have really plagued him, throughout the year. He had a couple more drops yesterday. Actually, one of their biggest passing plays yesterday came from their tailback, I believe. So numbers are a little bit inflated, but hey, Auburn,
Davis that threw the pass.
Correct, Davis. So I mean, Auburn did what they were supposed to do. How are they going to respond after what was a very disappointing loss last week on the road to LSU, the second of 3 consecutive road games? They did what they had to do. This game was never in question. Auburn moves along, and now they got a big test coming up with A&M.
Well, we talk about Auburn's offense and establishing an identity. Jarrett Stidham, I think, is a pretty good college quarterback.
Yeah.
You give him some time, you let him, you give him some time in the pocket, he could pick you apart. I know he's been off a little bit. However, I think Auburn's identity is running the football. Auburn can run the football like most teams with Petway, with Johnson. They're hard to beat. They were able to out-physical Arkansas. Arkansas had all, well, heck, Arkansas is trying to stop you with 9 players on the field.
Can we talk about that real quick?
The first touchdown is ridiculous.
The first touchdown of the game, Stidham runs in from 15 yards out for a touchdown, and they freeze the frame. I've seen 10 guys on a field. Heck, I've seen 13 guys on a field. I have never seen 9 guys on a field before, and this is how you start the game. Red zone defense with 9 players? What is going on in Fayetteville?
How can that even happen?
What is going on in Fayetteville? I'm serious. Like, how do you defend that to your boss? If you're the head coach, and it was a defensive coordinator issue, whatever, you're the guy who has to answer questions about that. How do you respond to that? I mean, it's clear that you've lost control of things that are going on in your football program.
All right, let's just keep it right there then.
You got a freshman quarterback coming off the field, right, in Cole Kelly, who didn't expect to play this year.
Screaming at his coaches.
They never got this guy ready. He's screaming at coaches. He's pointing at teammates. I mean, it's a dumpster fire what's going on in Arkansas right now. I'm sorry, man.
Overall, Arkansas has lost 7 of 9, given up at least 40 points now in 4 straight SEC losses. Where do you go with Brett Bielema? Let me tell you this. They're 2-5. Now, they still have Ole Miss, Coastal Carolina, and Mizzou, all very winnable, should win the games. That's 5 wins. They have to beat either Mississippi State or LSU to get to a bowl. I don't see that happening.
They're not going to a bowl. They don't deserve to go to a bowl.
But the likelihood is this team goes 5-7. Is Brett Bielema back? Jeff Long is still your athletic director,
right,
still your supporter. He's the man that hired you.
No,
is he back?
No, I don't think so. I mean, 9 guys on the field, cannot stop anybody, cannot run the football. Brett Bielema, his identity, offensive line play, run the football, control the clock. They don't do any of that. So it didn't work. I have no idea what they're going to do in the future moving forward. It's going to be very interesting hire, knowing that they're in the SEC West, knowing that you're going to be probably going against the same kind of coach that Ole Miss is going for. Tennessee's going to be looking for a head coach, so it's going to be very competitive out there in the market as far as what you can pay these guys. And I don't know that they're going to be – I know they have a lot of money, but I don't know they're going to be able to pay them the kind of money when you're paying Bielema $10 million to go away.
Well, I was going to say we want to get your comments on Brett Bielema on this Auburn team as well, but I'm looking at the chat board and everyone wants to talk about LSU, Alabama.
Yeah.
We're still on that game. Will Embren writes, there's only one team left on our schedule that might give us a problem, and that is Auburn.
Yeah, I'm still impressed with Auburn. That was a tough – listen, in the SEC, to go on the road and win a game against a tough defense like LSU, that was a tough football game last week. And they had the punt return. I'm not making excuses for them. LSU deserved to win the game, but that's a tough place to win. And
yeah, yes, it is.
So, I think Auburn and Georgia, to me, are just – they're neck and neck. And I know Georgia fans don't want to hear that. I think that any day, either one of those teams could beat each other. But at the end of the day, Georgia's the team that has to go on the road. And I know the road team has had the majority of the success in this series most recently. But I just think that that's going to be very, very tough for Georgia to go on the road, take on – and I know Auburn's got who the week before? Texas A&M, I think. So it's going to be
A&M's going to be a physical game.
It's going to be a tough game.
I don't know why you want to put Auburn up there on an even par with Georgia. I don't see that.
I do see
I see a few too many holes in this team. I know the Auburn defense is good, but I just think that Georgia defense is flying around like they look like Alabama defensively, and at the end of the day, I think that's the difference in this game. And again, yeah, this is going to be a road game for Georgia, having to go into Auburn, but historically in this series, at least the last 10 or 15 years, I think Georgia's won more games at Jordan-Hare Stadium than Auburn has beaten them.
Yeah, that's
quite
fair.
Frankly.
I think Stidham's a little bit better quarterback than Fromm is right now. Playmakers, I do give Georgia the edge. Honestly, I really do. I think this Ridley guy is outstanding. I mean, he really came out of nowhere. You got playmakers at tight end. We know about the running backs. That's a wash with Auburn as far as I'm concerned. But the thing I like about Auburn is that they're battle-tested. They have gone on the road. They've played at Death Valley. They played at Clemson. They have gone on the road. They've played at the other Death Valley. They've played at Baton Rouge. Those are two tough, physical football teams to play on the road. Georgia hasn't done that yet. I'm not giving Notre Dame. I'm not putting Notre Dame in the same conversation. Go on the road playing Clemson and LSU. I just wonder how Georgia is going to be on the road. That's going to be a tough.
Well, I'll tell you what, Georgia may have had the weekend off, but the Georgia fans are with us.
Kirby had the weekend. I don't want to hear that.
Well, they didn't really have it off. These guys worked their butts off. But Jay UGA owns Auburn. Ricky Mitchell says Georgia owns Auburn. Bradford Williams, Georgia is Auburn's daddy. Timothy Stewart, SEC West is the SEC. Keegan Montgomery, Dogs own Auburn. Man, a lot of
that's
dog
up
fans
the
are out, my friends.
Listen, I am not. Listen, everybody's attacking me about the Notre Dame.
Case Hickman is giving you crap now too. No, we are not neck and neck. We will take Auburn, and
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. You know,
and
everybody's
we'll take out our rival this
Don't
week,
forget, everybody's saying, don't forget Georgia went on the road and beat Notre Dame. I'm not discounting that at all. I'm not discounting that at all. There were a lot of Georgia fans in that crowd, and that has a lot to do with, I think, their success. I really do. I think you look at the stadium, you see the amount of fans that they had there. I think that helped their performance. I really do. You're on the road, you're saying, my God, everybody came here to watch us play. Let's go out. Let's win one for our guys. But when you go into an environment like Auburn, and Tennessee, I would say the same thing, but they're non-existent. But when you go into an environment like Auburn where it's going to be 90% Tiger fans, it's going to be a little bit different from going to Notre Dame.
Let me ask you this. Do you give Georgia a better chance of winning at Auburn than you do LSU winning at Alabama?
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, it's funny. We're talking about November football. We're still in October with some great games to come up on the schedule, including we're going to talk a little bit later on in the show about the Georgia-Florida game coming up.
They're still going to play
next week. Apparently they are. Let's take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Mississippi State, Kentucky. This game down in Starkville, and Mississippi State just dominates. 45-7 final count. Nick Fitzgerald getting it done, 155 yards through the air. He also ran for over 100 yards. Close game in the first half, but then Mississippi State just blows it open, and this team has rebounded from back-to-back losses.
I think the big thing that I took away from this is if there was any question as far as which direction these two teams were going, Mississippi State with the big wins early on in the season, mainly over LSU in big fashion, is that maybe Mississippi State was a little bit overrated the way Georgia took care of their business. I think they're right where they are. I mean, this is a team going in the right direction. They're a very good football team at home. They always have been. Mm-hmm. So for anybody going into Starkville, it's going to be a tough place to get a win. But I think, separating themselves from the middle of the pack, is Mississippi State in the conversation with Texas A&M as far as being underneath Auburn? Are they in that conversation,
no.
or is A&M head and heels above?
I think A&M's got the talent.
But on the other side, Kentucky, if there was any question about there being any team in the SEC East even having a shot at catching Georgia, it would have been for Kentucky to win this game. And not only did they not win,
it's Kentucky fool's gold.
Fool's gold. Is that very well put.
Is it? Is Kentucky? Yeah, they are.
Yeah, please.
This is at the end of the day, Mark Stoops has done an amazing job of getting talent to Kentucky, but their talent level is still not on par with the Georgia and with an Auburn. They're just not there yet. Are they fool's gold? They'll get to a bowl game. They'll likely finish the regular season with about 7 wins, but it's just tough to bridge that gap. Next week they're home to Tennessee. Then they've got Ole Miss. That'll give them 7 wins right there.
Yeah. But here's the thing: is a program. As a fan, if you're a Kentucky football fan, you feel like you should have been 6-0 going into this game. You're thinking, hey, this is as good a chance as we've had to do anything special in the last 10 years, or at least since Stoops has been here. And you got a true test. If we're going to be legitimate contenders, if we're going to be a team that's respected in the SEC, going to Starkville and not winning but competing, that's a good barometer, I would think. But to go there and not show up, it's same old, same old. It's fool's gold, like you said. So I think for the rest of the teams in the SEC East, primarily Georgia, who maybe had an obstacle, no, it's over.
I really like Nick Fitzgerald, man. This kid competes. But when push comes to shove, if he has to throw the football, that's where Mississippi State has had some problems. I don't know where you put him in the pecking order of SEC quarterbacks. I like what he can do when given the time to throw, but if the run game is shut down, I think Mississippi State can have some issues.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it against Georgia. When they play teams that are athletically superior, they just take away the run game. Load the box, make them throw the football, and when they're one-dimensional, they can't do it. And that's what separated that great Mississippi State team a few years ago with Dak Prescott, is that they were able to do both. And so with Fitzgerald coming back next year as a senior, I think Mississippi State's going to be very good next year. They got a pretty young football team. They got a chance to win 8-9 games next year.
Well, they got a chance to win 8-9 games this year. 5-2 right now. They do play at Texas A&M. But they've got the game against UMass. That's a W. Do play Alabama. At Arkansas. At Ole Miss. That's 3 wins right there. Get you 8 before you even go into a bowl game.
Right.
Dan Mullen does it again. Somehow this team always ends up in a bowl game and always seems to me to exceed expectations by just a little bit.
He does. And he seems like, I think next year, what I just kind of hit on a little bit, I think with the quarterback coming back and the opportunity to, I don't want to say have a special year, but to win maybe 8, 9, maybe 10 games, who knows if things fall right. I think next year, at the end of next year, and I don't know off the top of my head what his contract situation is. Everybody always talks about Dan Mullen taking a job elsewhere. I think after next season is the year where you seriously see Dan Mullen get some suitors.
Why after next year? He's going to be close to a decade by then.
Yeah, well, because I think they're going to have a good team next year.
Right. Well, you got a decent team this year. You talk about them being tough at home. At home, 4-0 this year, outscored opponents 166-24.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah, and what was really impressive yesterday, third down. They're 12 of 18 on third down. I mean, that says a lot about a team when you can keep your offense on the field. That's how you win football games.
The one thing about Mississippi State, though, and ever since Dan Mullen's been there, you never see him lay down. You never see them lay down. They compete. They get after it, and he's established an identity there in Starkville. And you think about the mess that was there for so many years, the inconsistencies with that football program. So, I mean, everybody knows Dan Mullen's done a great job, but they're a very tough football team at home.
Ryan Wright chimes in, Bama has Mississippi State at home. Yeah, okay, you're right. I mean, I just don't see Mississippi State being able to keep that game very close.
No.
They did
It's
bounce.
about one-dimensional. Right. I mean, Alabama is just, you're not running the football. Okay, Mr. Fitzgerald, you're going to have to throw for 350 to even compete, and that's not happening.
And that's kind of what it comes down to. For Mississippi State to go into Tuscaloosa and be competitive, Nick Fitzgerald is going to have to be Superman. He's going to have to be Dak Prescott at his very best. And, man, Tuscaloosa, that's a tough place to do that at. But a nice win for Mississippi State. They're going to get to the 7 or 8 win total, and they keep things very interesting. Can they compete with Texas A&M? Can they? I think the Aggies, especially since they've turned it up defensively, I'm not sure that A&M at home is going to be losing this game unless, again, all comes down to turnovers.
How much do you think is for Kellen Mond knowing that that it's his job the rest of the year? He doesn't have to worry about the other guy coming back from injury and saying, well, the job is yours. You just focus on getting better. I think that's huge for an 18-year-old kid. To know that he doesn't have to worry about somebody coming and taking his job, and he can just focus on the playbook and focus on building relationships with his teammates and the coaches. He seems like the kind of guy that embraces all that. He's like a natural leader. I think you're really going to see Texas A&M offensively start to do more and more as the season goes on.
Well, at season ender, A&M against LSU is going to be a great football game. Happens Thanksgiving weekend. I think that's going to be a great game. All right, I want to take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete, the game that we were holding our breath on. Mizzou taking on Idaho, and Missouri gets it done. Look at the numbers there. Look at those numbers.
Yeah, Missouri ends a 5-game losing streak. Drew Lock, by the way, first play of the game throws an interception. Comes off the field. Josh Heupel gets all over him. I'm talking about, like, as bad as you've ever seen a coach go after a quarterback. How does he respond? Was he throw 4 touchdown passes in the first quarter? 3 touchdowns.
6 for the game.
Yeah, 6 for the game. So, hey, look, it's Idaho. You're supposed to take care of business. This is what you're supposed to do. But I thought Barry Odom early in the week on Monday at practice, he told his team, he said, look, we can't change anything that's happened before. This is a game we're supposed to win. It's at home. It's homecoming. Here's what we do. We're starting the season over. I know that's cliche. I know it sounds ridiculous. But if you're Missouri, hey, you cling on to anything you can. And so that's what they did. They started the season over. I think that was why he was so upset. Heupel was. He threw the interception on the first play after starting the season over. But they rounded out. They turned it into a win. They got UConn coming up next, a chance to win 2 in a row and maybe have a little bit of momentum to finish.
For Barry Odom, this is just what the doctor ordered. You needed a win. You needed a win like this. You get it. So Missouri, they're not going to lay down and die for the rest of the season.
No. It was a big win.
I don't know what else to say.
No, it was a big win for them. I do think Drew Lock's going to play on Sundays in the NFL.
I haven't seen enough of him. He had 6 touchdown passes in this game, first game of the season, and their win over Missouri State. He had 7 touchdown passes. Give him time, he'll light it up.
Yeah.
Is he a Sunday player in the NFL? I haven't watched enough of him to say that.
He's 6'4", 225, so he's got the size. He's got the arm. Does he have the intangibles? That's the only thing. In the NFL, we see these guys with the 10-cent brains, if you will. They don't have the leadership ability.
Why'd you have to bring up Ryan Leaf's name?
Well, I don't want to, call out Mr. Leaf. He's done a hell of a job turning his life around.
Yes,
he really has. An example for everybody.
Sorry, Ryan, that was a cheap shot.
But no. It all depends on whether he's got that in his brain that he's going to be the leader, that he's going to work hard. If he's got all that, and I don't know, there's nothing holding him back. Because physically, man, he's as gifted as a quarterback as there is in the SEC. He can throw that thing.
All right, let's take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Texas Pete, spice up your tailgate. I do it every week. I want to go to the SEC standings.
Let's do it.
First to the East, where it's Georgia and then everyone else. Only team that's unbeaten, only team with less than 2 losses. South Carolina still hanging in there, 5-2 overall. Kentucky with their second loss yesterday, 5-2 overall. And then you still have the 3 teams in the East without a victory. Clearly, it's Georgia and then the rest this year.
Wow, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Missouri, all winless in the SEC. Something's got to give, Bob.
They do play each other.
They do play each other. Looking ahead, obviously the Georgia-Florida game. You got the big.
Well, we don't want to get.
We're going to break down that game shortly. All right. You have Vanderbilt on the road next week, who's just been dreadful the last few weeks, taking on South Carolina in Columbia. Mm-hmm. An opportunity for South Carolina to get the win, move to 6-2. Get bowl that 4th eligible. Win in the conference, bowl eligible. I just want to talk about the job that Will Muschamp's done in Columbia. When he came on, there were serious doubters. People scratching their heads saying, well, you look at Florida, what could you have possibly seen down there that indicates to you that he could be a head football coach in the Southeastern Conference in the same division as Florida was? And they were a complete mess when he took the job on. In such a short time. Now, it helps that he's got Jake Bentley. I think he's a tremendous leader of that team. What they've been able to do defensively and the amount of momentum around the program that you have in such a short amount of time, Will Muschamp deserves a ton of credit.
I agree.
He really does.
Steve Spurrier took that program higher than it's ever been before, a couple of 11-win seasons.
Oh, come on now, Bob. I did some good things, too.
He did. Now do your Spurrier. So he did some great things with that program, and then at the end, Steve kind of, I don't want to say he mailed it in, but they were not very good at the end of his tenure. As you
there was
said,
nothing left.
They're somewhat of a mess, and Will Muschamp has built it up a lot faster than I thought.
Lost his best player this year.
Yeah,
lost his best player too, and they got some tough football games ahead of them. So we'll find out what happens. But if they win next week against Vanderbilt, they go on the road. In Athens the following week. So Georgia not only has Florida, but then they're going to have South Carolina again. Tough back-to-back games for Georgia. Games they're supposed to win. They'll be double-digit favorite in both. But, tough games nonetheless for Georgia coming up.
Well, whereas it's Georgia and then all the rest in the SEC East. In the West, a lot tighter situation. Yeah, Alabama is still the team to beat, the only unbeaten in the West. But then you have a few teams with just 1 loss. Auburn just 1 loss, LSU. And Texas A&M, the team that we sort of gave up on at the beginning of the season after the UCLA loss. A&M is 5-2, 3-1 in the conference, can control its own destiny, right? No,
they've won a lot of close games. Look at the points for and points against, the differential with Alabama. 344 to 78. I mean, if you're an Alabama football fan, week in and week out, first of all, you're spoiled rotten. Your expectations are so high. You got humbled a little bit by Deshaun Watson and Dabo last year. But, I mean, what are you looking for? Just complete annihilation on a week-to-week basis? I'm asking you on our Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Hit us up on the Facebook Live page. I mean, what are you looking for week in, week out? Just complete and total domination of your opponent? Because nobody's giving you a game.
Yes. I don't know. No one has given Alabama a game to this point. Florida State was there when Francois was still standing upright.
I want to say this, with the exception of Penn State's performance last night, which I was very impressed with. Michigan, not as good as people thought. I think the second best football team I've seen all year was Florida State in that first game before their quarterback got hurt. Now they're 2-4 after they lose to Louisville at home.
Shocking loss yesterday.
I mean, it just shows you the emotional state of young men in college athletics when a little adversity comes in. And it's up to the leaders in the team. It's up to the head coaches. And this isn't an indictment on Jimbo Fisher at all. I think he's outstanding, as good as it gets. Same thing with Kelly and the rest of their staff. But to me, that game up until Francois got hurt, that's the second best, third best football team I've seen all year. I'm being dead serious. I thought Florida State was as impressive as a team as I've seen all season long. And it is just gone.
All right, you want to give out some game balls? How
yeah,
about,
let's do it.
Defensive
game balls, SEC. Boy, you're really throwing me off here. I'm trying to think. Give me a minute on that.
All right, I'll give out my defensive game ball. I don't remember what you had there on your defensive game ball. I'm giving my defensive game ball to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Gave up just 260 yards yesterday, and this defense looked dominating.
Kentucky couldn't run the ball.
Kentucky couldn't run the ball, and you know, Stephen Johnson really couldn't throw it. Allowed Kentucky to cross midfield just 3 times. And this is a defense that earlier in the year gave up 31 points to Georgia, gave up 49 points to Auburn. Well, the ship has been righted. Last week, gave up just 10 points to BYU and then just the lone touchdown yesterday. Really love the way that this defense is playing right now. Yeah, Alabama's defense was better, clearly, but I just want to give a game ball to Mississippi State. I thought they earned it.
Yeah, they could not run the football at all yesterday. Alabama yesterday, 9 tackles for a loss as they continue to just dominate opponents in the backfield. So, I mean, I don't know how you go against Alabama. Tennessee, where they have 108 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, so more of the same yesterday from Alabama.
All right, let's go ahead and give up some offensive game balls. You want to do that?
Sure.
Have anyone in mind, or are you still doing that sort of thing?
Well, I don't know who's been peg-hole for me yet, so I'll have to take a look. I'm going to go with Drew Lock. Drew Lock, 467 yards, 6 more touchdowns yesterday. I know it was against Idaho, but this guy was having his way with the Vandal defense early and often yesterday. And you got to think at the end of the year when SEC honors come out, is he a guy that gets a look as first, second team SEC quarterback?
Come on, seriously, really?
I mean, hey, he's putting up the numbers.
He put up 7 touchdowns against.
That's right.
Against Missouri State, and then he puts up 6 against Idaho.
As a rec basketball player, I know that when you see the opponent coming in and they don't look like they can play that well, that's when you pad your stats. Everybody knows that, Bob.
Well, yeah, he's not SEC first or second or even third team. I'm not really sure where you were going with that. I'm going to give up
my game ball.
My offensive game ball. I'm going to give it up to the LSU offensive line. You know, a few weeks back, that Troy game, they were physically dominated by that Troy defense. Mm-hmm. I even felt bad for LSU in that game.
Don't feel bad for LSU.
But they have turned it around in a hurry. I got to give it up for Ed. You know, I've been kind of on the I'm not on the Ed bandwagon, but he has got this team turned it around, Matt Canada. But the offensive line yesterday, man, they allowed this team to pile up 393 yards on the ground, 200 yards passing. Heck, Etling only had to throw the ball 12 times in the game.
Right, I noticed that. I mean, he doesn't have to make plays with his arm.
Geis not only ran for 276, his backup, Williams, runs for over 100 yards, 593. This offensive line was whipped by Troy, was whipped by Mississippi State.
Right.
I'm not sure how they've turned it around, but I think game ball of the entire LSU offense, really.
Yeah. You talked about the 2 freshmen started on the line. like I said, to be 18 years old starting on the offensive line in the Southeastern Conference speaks volumes for athleticism. The only
Toby Weatherby was back too, and that helps.
Right. So the more experience that these guys, the continuity that they get playing together, can continue to get better. I think LSU, man, I know they're losing their quarterback, but Chalk's going to be gone too. But moving forward, I mean, they're so young on defense, and they're so young up front on the offensive line. I mean, they're built for the long run. They really are. I don't know if they're going to compete with Alabama, but I mean, just think where they were a couple weeks ago. They were trying to run Coach O out of town. He can recruit.
I was trying to run him out of town. Well, I wasn't really trying to run him out of town, but I could understand people wanting to run him out of town. All right, want to hear from you. Georgia, Florida.
Let's do it.
This coming Saturday, rivalry game in Jacksonville. Is there any way that the Gators keep this football game close?
No.
Quite frankly, no.
No, I'm being serious. I mean, defensively, they're going to, present some challenges for Georgia, make a case that maybe the best defense Georgia's faced this year. But offensively, they just can't get right. Franks, I thought after the first game against Michigan, maybe he was a guy that was going to get better as the season has gone on. He's regressed. He's not even as good as he was back then. He can make some plays with his feet. Throwing the football.
He's good at Hail Marys.
He's good. He's a great Hail Mary thrower. If you ever need a Hail Mary. But I'm not sold on him. Their lack of playmakers with the suspensions, the injuries, everything that goes into that. I know they've had the extra week to prepare. But I think the biggest X factor in this is a couple things. I think one is Kirby Smart having an extra week, and I know Florida does too, to get healthy primarily. But Georgia, remember the game against Missouri, they gave up some plays. And I think that if you want to learn from some mistakes, that was a great opportunity to do that. So I think they're going to correct those mistakes, even making it harder for Florida to score. And I think the biggest X factor in this whole football game is that Kirby Smart lost this game last year. Kirby Smart played on those teams that got dominated and embarrassed by Steve Spurrier. This has been a one-sided rivalry as of late, and I think Kirby, when he took this job, his sales pitch, not that they didn't come crawling and begging for Kirby, was we're going to beat Florida. We're going to beat Florida. And I think this is the game that's circled. This is the statement game for Georgia.
Well, E.D. Booker says Florida has no quarterback, no O-line, and no receivers. And
she's right.
I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I just don't see how Florida game plans to do anything consistently offensively against this Georgia D. I don't know where you go. Franks is not going to have the time to throw. He is not as accurate as he needs to be. The running game is middling at best. Yeah, I just don't see how Florida's offense keeps this game close. And the Florida defense is good, but you put that much pressure on them, you have them on the field for close to 40 minutes in the game, they're going to wear down.
Right.
If Georgia, it might be a game at half, but in the second half, if Georgia's dominating that clock, this thing could get ugly.
You can make an argument Florida should be 1-5, right? And every reason that they've lost these games is offensively. They are so challenged offensively, and the worst thing that could have happened to them is Del Rio getting hurt. He was the one guy that provided stability back there in your offense, and now he's gone. You're relying on a freshman. Maybe an extra week of practice is going to help you out a little bit. But again, the X factor here is Georgia's hungry. They are dialed in. They are focused. And if there's an opportunity for Georgia maybe to put a little bit extra on like the old ball coach used to, Kirby's going to do it. There's no doubt in my mind. That doesn't go away from you. When you're embarrassed as a player, all those years that he was, that does not go away. And if he's going to get an opportunity, and this is as good as opportunity as Georgia's ever had to kick Florida while they're down, they're going to do it. They're going to take advantage of it.
Well, Charlene says dogs will dominate. Consistency is our strength. Both sides of the ball being equal. Go Dogs. And I think there's something to be said with that. Right now, I would say Georgia's defense is ahead of the offense, but the consistency on both sides of the ball, that's a good point. This team is not making any mistakes defensively and very few offensively. And, yeah, like you said, a little extra motivation from Kirby, having been dominated by Florida in the past 25 years. Here's an alum that knows what this game means.
Here's the other thing. Georgia top 5 in the country defensively in scoring defense, rushing defense. yards per game, all that stuff. Where do you think they're going to stand nationally? Not that any of this matters, but it does matter. Where do you think that they're going to stand nationally after back-to-back games against Florida and South Carolina? They're going to be number one in every defensive category in the country. I mean, they really are. And from a recruiting standpoint, they just got the linebacker kid here from up there in is it Dalton or Rome, somewhere like that. One of the top outside linebackers in the country. But if you're recruiting, you're saying, look, man, we're the number one defense in the country. We're better than Alabama. We're better than Michigan. We're better. That's a heck of a recruiting tool for a guy that's been there for basically a cup of coffee. To be able to turn this thing around that quickly. There's a ton of momentum around that football program right now.
Rankings, we've come full circle from the top of the show. Rankings don't matter at this point of the season. But where do you rank Alabama? Where do you rank Georgia? Is Penn State in between those two?
Man, Penn State looked good last night. I think so. I think McSorley, the experience that he brings at the quarterback position, I think that Georgia, Penn State right now, if I was BCS committee, and they're seeded number 2, I think I would have Penn State. But here's the deal. Penn State goes on the road, takes on Ohio State this week. Ohio State coming off a bye. JT Barrett's playing outstanding.
Playing great.
The last 6 weeks for Ohio State, except for that one hiccup that they had. And Ohio State always does this, don't they? They have the one loss that just comes out of nowhere that makes absolutely no sense, and then they beat everybody else by 70. So this is going to be a big test for James Franklin. We're going to find out if they're contenders or pretenders sooner or later. By the way, one thing I want to mention, 3:30 this week. Talk about all the games were on last night at 8 o'clock to go along with the World Series. Next week at 3:30, you have NC State, Notre Dame. You have TCU at Iowa State. Iowa State playing great. They're going to be in the top 25. They beat Oklahoma early in the year. Penn State, Ohio State's penciled in at 3:30, and you got Georgia, Florida. All 4 of those games are at 3:30, Bob. So get your DVR ready.
I don't think the nation as a whole is going to care so much about NC State, Notre Dame, although NC State, don't sleep on this team, lost just 1 game. Right. TCU is still unbeaten. Iowa State is looking fantastic. I don't think the nation cares about those 2 games. What's going to be interesting to me is who has a higher rating. Penn State, Ohio State, or Georgia, Florida. Now, I know that game.
Oh, it'll be Penn State.
Not so fast, my friend.
You really? This is a discussion.
Well, the SEC has such a great following. I just think that this game is going to be a ratings winner for CBS, which has not had a whole lot of great games this year. I mean, their game yesterday, before the season started, all right, Tennessee might be able to keep it close with Alabama. It's going to be our 3:30 game. Well, it turns out to be
CBS has had a tough slate this year. They've had it as far as picking the good games. It's just been blowout after blowout after blowout. Somebody, I do want to mention this from our Facebook says, why is Ohio State, Penn State, this is from Chris Little, why is that game so early? Well, the only reason I can suspect that game would be so early is that there's a primetime 8 o'clock game.
I don't know. You're going to go through the whole schedule?
No. I think it's a very important question. And
if you're a Big Ten fan, it is.
The 8 o'clock game next week on national TV is Georgia Tech Clemson. So there is no reason.
There you have it.
I think it's important that we realize that there's absolutely no reason that Penn State and Ohio State play.
All right, I'm fixated on the SEC. I think we're going to have a great week and a great weekend coming up. And, between Georgia, Alabama, and now LSU and Auburn.
Yep.
It's going to be a great finish to the season. Really is.
So next week, real quick for SEC games, you got Arkansas at Ole Miss. If Arkansas loses this game, it's all done. It's completely, and they're on the road again, the poor guys. Georgia, Florida, we know 3:30. Vanderbilt taking on South Carolina. It's a 4 o'clock on the SEC Network. Vanderbilt playing terrible. South Carolina chance to go to 6-2, 4-2 in conference. We just talked about Will Muschamp. Missouri taking on UConn on the road. Chance for them to win 2 in a row. Mississippi State on the road. A&M. Very interesting matchup there.
That might end up being the best game of the day.
I agree. 7:15. Texas A&M coming off a bye. They're going to be ready. Mississippi State, can they play as well on the road? We'll wait and see. And then Tennessee, Kentucky next week in Lexington. If Butch Jones and Tennessee lose that game, I think that's the breaking point. I think that's when you fire.
The guys in the control room are getting in my ear and saying, would you please tell Hans to shut up? We want to go.
I have one more thing I have to talk about. No, I'm just kidding. I'm done.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, guys, he's done.
Thank you, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
This has been the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Texas Pete, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. For Hans Heiser, I'm Bob Fasella. We'll be here next Sunday morning at 10 o'clock to talk about some great action. We will see you then. Take care.
See you.